On my 63rd birthday, my son drove me to the coast, pulled up to a salt-stained, dilapidated cottage and said, "This is your gift. Live here." He drove away, leaving me in the middle of nowhere, but he couldn't have imagined who lived in the next cove over, and that he was already walking towards me, a storm lantern in his hand. Hello, my dear listeners. Thank you for being here. If you enjoy stories like this, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. I always love to read where you're listening from, so don't hesitate to leave a comment. And now settle in and enjoy the story. In my life, as it seemed until recently, there weren't many events worthy of a long story. I had always lived quietly, almost invisibly. Even in my own Boston condo, the one my late husband and I bought when the city was a different world, I had eventually become like a shadow, a piece of furniture that takes up space but is no longer noticed. For the last 10 years, that condo belonged not to me, but to a younger life, the life of my son Leo and his wife Chloe. I occupied the smallest room, the one that used to be a home office. My books, photos of my husband Richard, the old leather armchair he loved to read in, all of it had gradually migrated here, yielding to the sleek, bright, and empty space that Chloe adored. I didn't argue. Why would I? As long as my son was happy. Every morning began the same. I would rise before anyone else at 6 so as not to make noise, not to disturb the young couple's sleep. I'd tiptoe to the kitchen, start the oatmeal for Leo, and brew 2 different kinds of coffee. A strong dark roast for him, some special single origin pour-over for Chloe, the kind with floral notes that made my own throat itch. I'd brew a simple black coffee for myself and drink it in my room, so as not to be in the way. My entire pension went into the household account. Every last cent. Mom, what do you need money for? Leo would say, awkwardly avoiding my gaze. We buy everything together. And I would agree. Indeed, what for? I wore my old clothes, rarely went out except to the grocery store or the pharmacy. All my own desires had long since withered, shriveling down to a single point, to see my son happy. I remember giving away all my savings, the money I'd been putting aside for cataract surgery, when Chloe urgently needed a new designer coat. "Oh, Mom, you understand," she cooed, draping an arm around my shoulders. "Everyone at Leo's firm is so high status. I have to fit in. It's important for his career." And Leo would nod, looking at me with gratitude. So I gave it to them, and then I just started buying stronger reading glasses from the drugstore. My opinion held no weight in the house. If I said the soup was too salty, Chloe would purse her lips and say, "Margaret, at your age, your taste buds aren't what they used to be." If I tried to give my son advice based on my life experience, he would gently interrupt, "Mom, things are different now. We'll figure it out ourselves." They figured it out, and I was a function. A cook, a cleaner, an interest-free ATM. An invisible person whose presence was convenient, but not essential. Sometimes in the evenings, sitting in my armchair, I would look at Richard's photograph and ask him, "Did we raise him right, Richard? He's a good man, isn't he? It's just that life is so different now." Richard would remain silent in the photo, and I would convince myself that I was doing the right thing. A mother must sacrifice for her child. Isn't that so? And so my 63rd birthday arrived. As usual, I expected nothing. Maybe a small bouquet of daisies, which I loved, or a box of my favorite dark chocolates. That morning, Chloe was surprisingly affectionate. She even hugged me and chirped, "Margaret, happy birthday. Leo and I have such a gift for you. You're going to be speechless." I admit I melted. Something warm stirred inside me, a forgotten feeling of childlike anticipation. Leo was also unusually fidgety, constantly checking his watch. "Get ready, Mom," he said. "We're going to get your present." I put on my best dress, the only one that wasn't worn out, a simple linen dress in a pale blue. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old woman with tired eyes, but at that moment, for some reason, they were happy. We got in the car. Chloe stayed home, citing a headache. "You two go on without me," she said, waving. "Tell me all about it later." We drove for a long time. The city streets gave way to suburban highways, then to desolate fields and sparse woods. At first, I tried to ask Leo where we were going, but he answered in monosyllables, not looking at me. It's a surprise, Mom. You'll see. So I fell silent, gazing out the window. A sense of unease grew in my soul. This road didn't lead to a resort, or a spa, or any other place one might celebrate a birthday. It led into the wilderness. Finally, we turned onto a battered dirt road. The car shook so violently my teeth chattered. Around us were only abandoned fields overgrown with weeds and leaning utility poles. And then a village appeared ahead. Or rather, what was left of it. A few houses sunk into the ground, blackened by time. Not a single one looked inhabited. Leo stopped in front of the most grotesque structure. It wasn't even a house. More of a shack with a collapsed roof and windows boarded up with planks. All around it, nettles grew as high as a man, and a rotten fence sagged. "We're here," he said hoarsely, turning off the engine. I was silent. I didn't understand. This couldn't be happening. It had to be a mistake, a cruel joke. Leo got out of the car, opened the trunk and pulled out my old duffel bag. The one I'd used for beach trips 20 years ago. Inside was a change of clothes, a robe, and a bar of soap. He placed the bag on the ground next to a patch of burdock. "Here, Mom." He gestured at the ruin. "This is your present. We bought you a house. Your very own in the fresh air. You'll live here. It's good for you." The words fell into the deafening silence like stones into a deep well. I looked at him, at my son, and I didn't recognize him. A stranger's face, empty, glassy eyes. There was no malice in them, no pity, nothing but weariness and irritation. "Leo," I whispered, my voice failing me. "What is this? Why?" "Mom, don't start." He winced. "We decided this would be for the best. For everyone. You need a rest from the city bustle and we need our own space. Chloe's pregnant." He threw out the last words like a trump card. An excuse for everything. He wasn't even looking at me. He was in a hurry. He got back in the car, slammed the door. I stood on the road watching him through the windshield. He started the engine. And in that very moment, as the roar of the engine tore through the dead silence of the village, something inside me happened. It wasn't rage or hurt or despair. It was something else. As if deep inside my chest, where for all these years only a warm, all-forgiving love had lived, something clicked. Loudly, distinctly, like the turn of a metal key in a rusted lock. Click. And in the place of warmth came cold. Absolute, crystal-clear ice. The car started moving, kicking up a cloud of dust. I didn't cry. I didn't scream after him. I just watched as the silver side of his luxury car shrank, turned into a dot, and disappeared around a bend. The dust slowly settled. The smell of gasoline dissipated. All that was left was me, my old duffel bag. A dead house on the edge of a dead village, and a deafening silence. And in that silence, for the first time in many years, I heard myself. Not a mother, not a mother-in-law, not a servant, but myself, Margaret Vance. And this Margaret spoke to me in a very calm, very clear voice. "That's it. Enough." I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And no one would ever take my life from me again. I would take it back myself. The dust raised by my son's car slowly settled on the tall Queen Anne's lace by the roadside. I stood motionless, listening to the fading hum of the engine. When it too was gone, a silence fell, the likes of which I hadn't heard since I was a child visiting my grandparents on their farm. But that silence had been alive, filled with the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves. This was a dead, oppressive silence. I slowly turned and looked at my gift. At this blackened husk of a cottage with its boarded-up windows. The porch sagged, one of the steps had rotted through, and last year's damp leaves were visible in the hole. The house was surrounded by a riot of weeds, wild blackberry bushes tangled with bindweed. A picture of complete desolation. A place forgotten by everyone. The place I was brought to be forgotten. Tears? No. Inside it was as dry as a desert. That icy click in my chest had frozen everything that might have poured out in bitter sobs. Despair was left somewhere back there, in my past life, in the car that drove my son away. Here on this abandoned land, There was only me and a cold, ringing clarity in my head. I approached the porch, automatically stepping over the rotten step, and placed my bag on the surviving edge. My gaze swept over the squalor, but my mind was already far away, in my bright, clean 3-bedroom condo in Boston. The very condo where Chloe was probably now considering what color curtains to hang in my former room. My room. The key word. It was the miserable, orphaned look of this broken-down cottage that made me remember what I myself had tried not to think about all these years, so as not to tempt fate. I remembered the words of my late husband, Richard. We were sitting in our kitchen about 10 years before he passed, and he, serious, uncharacteristically stern, placed a set of documents in front of me. "Maggie," he'd said then, looking me straight in the eye, "I'm going to the lawyer tomorrow and signing my half of the deed over to you completely, so you are the sole owner." I had waved my hands then, saying, "Why, Richard? We're a family, our son is growing up." But he shook his head. "A son is a son, but life is long. Anything can happen. You are the only one for me, and I need to be sure you'll always have your own corner. Yours and no one else's." I hadn't given it much thought then, but I did as he asked. And after his death, all the documents were registered in my name. Margaret Vance, the sole and rightful owner. Leo didn't know about this. He was sure the condo was a joint inheritance that would naturally pass to him over time. I never corrected him. Why? It seemed petty, a sign of mistrust towards my own son. How wrong I was. And then came a second memory, even more important. About 5 years ago, I received a notice of inheritance. My second cousin from Ohio, whom I had seen only once in my life as a small child, had passed away. A lonely, childless woman, she had left me her modest 2-bedroom house. I traveled there, handled the paperwork, sold it without haggling for the first offer I received, and deposited the entire sum into a separate savings account at the bank. I didn't say a word to Leo and Chloe. At that moment, they were taking out a large loan for a new car. And I knew what would happen if they found out about my money. It wouldn't be stolen. No, it would simply dissolve into urgent needs, into status, into the future. Just as my pension, my old savings, and my health had dissolved. And I stayed silent, not out of greed, but out of a self-preservation instinct I thought had long since atrophied within me. This account was my untouchable reserve, my last line of defense that no one knew about. These thoughts flashed through my mind not as hazy images, but as clear, sharp facts. As if someone had turned on a light in a dark closet, and I saw all the tools I had at my disposal. I opened my duffel bag. Leo must have packed it himself in a hurry. An old terrycloth robe, slippers, a towel, a bar of soap. And at the very bottom, among these simple belongings, lay my savior. An old flip phone, the kind Chloe contemptuously called a grandma phone. They had bought it for me several years ago so I would be on call. The simplest model, no internet, no extra features. They had no idea that its memory held the numbers that were now more important to me than anything else in the world. I pressed a button. The battery was almost full. I always kept it charged out of old habit. But the screen showed no service. My heart, which had been beating steadily and coldly until that moment, skipped a beat. Was it all for nothing? I looked around. The village was in a hollow. I needed to get higher. Without a second thought, I started up a overgrown path away from the house, up the slope of a small hill. My feet got tangled in burrs, branches whipped my face, but I didn't notice. I walked, looking at the phone screen as if it were a compass. And there, at the very top of the hill, where a lone crooked birch tree stood, 2 weak signal bars appeared. Enough. I found the number in my contacts. Arthur Jennings Bank. Arthur, the branch manager, a contemporary of my Richard. He had known me since my husband and I opened our first joint account. I pressed call. The rings were long, drawn out. "Hello," a familiar, slightly tired voice answered. "Arthur, hello. It's Margaret Vance." My voice sounded even, without a single tremor. I surprised myself. "Margaret, good afternoon. How can I help you?" A hint of surprise was in his voice. I hadn't called him personally in many years. "Arthur, I need you to do a few things. Urgently." Right now if possible. I'm listening. First, please block all powers of attorney and access to my accounts issued in the name of my son, Leo Vance. Everything without exception. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure, Margaret? Absolutely. I cut him off. Second, all my pension deposits that go to the joint card, I want them immediately redirected to my personal savings account. The one I opened 5 years ago. You remember? Yes, of course I remember. It will be done. And third, completely cut off his access to view the balances on my investment accounts. A complete financial blackout. From this moment on, all transactions on my accounts require my personal confirmation only. Personal? I understand, Margaret. It will all be executed within the hour. Thank you, Arthur. Goodbye. I ended the call. The first part of the plan was in motion. Now for the second. I found another number. Evelyn Reed, attorney. She had helped me with the inheritance from my cousin, a sharp, thorough, brilliant specialist. She answered almost immediately. Evelyn, hello. It's Margaret Vance. We worked together on the Ohio property. Margaret, of course I remember you. Hello. Has something happened? It has, I answered calmly. I need your help. It concerns my condo in Boston. I need to officially confirm my sole ownership and prepare documents that will prevent any encroachment on it by third parties, including my son. The lawyer paused for a second, processing the information. I understand. You want to completely secure your property. That's wise. Email me a copy of your passport and the title documents and I'll get to work. I'll prepare an official notice if necessary. I can't send them right now. I'm out of town and I don't have the documents with me. They're all back at the condo. But can you start by making inquiries with the Registry of Deeds? Pull all the files. Yes, of course. I can start immediately. You can count on me, Margaret. I am counting on you. Thank you. I lowered the phone. The cold in my chest hadn't disappeared, but now it felt different. It was not the cold of numbness. It was the cold of steel. The cold of a tool ready for work. I walked down the hill back to the house and now it looked different. It no longer seemed like a tomb, but rather a temporary headquarters, a quiet, secluded place from which I would wage my bloodless war. And at that moment I knew in my condo in my living room my son and his wife were probably drinking champagne, celebrating how cleverly they had arranged everything. Finally got rid of the old woman, Chloe would say, taking a sip. Now we can renovate and live like human beings. They were celebrating their victory. They had no idea they had just lost the war, without even knowing it had begun. I stood on the threshold of my new temporary refuge. For the first time in many years I breathed deeply, and the air, though it smelled of damp and decay, seemed pure to me. It was the air of freedom. The first hours I just sat on the high, surprisingly sturdy porch and looked at the overgrown garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft watercolor tones. The air was thick, smelling of damp leaves, moist earth and something else wild and unfamiliar. It doesn't smell like this in the city. The city smells of gasoline, dust, and other people's haste. Here time seemed to have stopped, frozen along with this abandoned village. When it got completely dark and the cold began to seep through my linen dress, I realized I had to act. Sitting on the porch wouldn't keep me warm or quench my thirst. The cold that had settled in my chest was internal. It gave me strength, but my body demanded its due. Carefully, feeling for the boards with my foot, I entered the house. Inside, the smell was even thicker. Dust, mouse droppings, and old settled wood. The air was heavy still. Thin strips of moonlight pierced through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, drawing whimsical patterns on the floor. I took out my old phone from my bag and turned on the flashlight. The dim beam snatched a Dutch oven with chipped tiles, a table covered in a thick layer of gray dust, and an overturned stool from the darkness. I didn't feel fear, only a strange, businesslike curiosity. It was as if I were taking over from a previous, very negligent owner. I walked through the rooms. There were two. In one, a sagging iron bed with a rusty spring mattress. In the other, emptiness. Only some rags lay in a corner. The floor creaked with every step, but it held firm. The house was old, but apparently built to last. It hadn't collapsed, just fallen asleep. My first task was water. I went outside and, with the flashlight, circled the property. And wonder of wonders, behind the house, in a thicket of nettles, I found it. An old well with a time-darkened frame and a heavy oak windlass. The chain was rusty but intact. I struggled to turn the handle. Something creaked, groaned, but the chain went down. And a minute later I heard a dull splash. Water. There was water. This was the first small victory. I found an old galvanized bucket on the porch, miraculously not rusted through, and after a few attempts managed to pull it up full to the brim. The water was icy and smelled of silt, but it was clear. I carried the bucket into the house, feeling my back muscles ache from the unaccustomed strain. The next 2 days I spent in labor. I didn't think about Leo, I didn't think about Chloe. My world had shrunk to this house and this plot of land. I found an old saw and an axe in the shed, broke up dry branches from a fallen apple tree, and started the stove. The smoke billowed into the cottage at first, but then the chimney warmed up, and a steady draft began to hum, filling the house with living warmth. I found some old newspapers and rags, washed the table and the floor in one room. The water after washing was black. I dragged dry straw from the shed, stuffed it into an old mattress I found in the attic. It became less hard to sleep. I was living like Robinson Crusoe, and this simple physical labor cleared my mind. Every evening I would climb my hill to catch a signal and just look at the screen. 2 bars. My connection to the world. I didn't call anyone. I waited. I knew they would call. It happened on the 3rd day. Towards evening, I was sitting on the porch, finishing an herbal tea made from currant leaves I'd found in the garden. The phone rang, shrill and unpleasant, breaking the evening silence. The screen lit up. Leo. I let it ring a few more times before answering. Inside, everything was calm. Yes, I said. Mom, finally. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. His voice held the usual condescending irritation. I haven't been anywhere, Leo. I'm breathing the air. There's a lot of it here, I answered evenly. All right, how are you settling in? He asked, in the tone of someone performing an unpleasant but necessary formality. I'm settling in bit by bit. Thank you for your concern. He missed my quiet irony. Listen, Mom, there's a problem. Chloe's card was declined at the store. Your supplementary card. The money is definitely there. I checked this morning. You didn't accidentally press something, did you? Maybe a glitch at the bank? Call them, will you? Ah, there it was. The first sign. The first ripple on the water of their serene calm. I was silent, letting him talk. You need to call, tell them everything is fine. Chloe got upset. She wanted to buy a dress. I pictured the scene. My daughter-in-law in an expensive boutique, handing over my card, onto which my pension was regularly deposited, and seeing declined on the terminal. Her surprise. Then indignation. How could this be? The old woman's account failed. Mom, are you listening? Leo hurried me. I'm listening, I said quietly. And then I heard him, apparently covering the receiver with his hand, but not very carefully, say to the side, I don't know, she's just sitting there silent. And in response came Chloe's voice, clear as the shattering of glass. I would know it among 1,000. Contemptuous hissing. What's the point of talking to her? She's putting on a show. Decided to show some character in her old age. She's offended, you see. It's nothing. She'll sit there in her wilderness without a penny, and she'll come crawling back, begging. Tell her to stop being a fool and go sort it out. I need that dress. Then Leo's voice again, quieter, conciliatory. Chloe, just wait. And hers again, louder. What, wait? We have the kitchen designer coming tomorrow, and our utilities aren't paid. We got a text today about the debt. Did she turn that off with her grandma phone too? Senile dementia is progressing. That's what I'll tell you. We shouldn't have bought her a house. We should have found her a place in a nursing home. Senile dementia. A show. Sit without a penny. These words didn't wound me. They were like a final, irrevocable diagnosis. They confirmed everything I had understood that day. When Leo left me on that road, to them I was not a person, not a mother, I was a thing. A function, an inconvenient, aging piece of furniture that had suddenly started to malfunction. And they weren't trying to fix it. They were just angry that it had stopped working as it should. All the tiny, hidden hope in the furthest corner of my soul, that maybe I was being too harsh, that I had overreacted, all of it evaporated in that moment. The ice in my chest became harder than granite. There was a rustle on the line again, and Leo's voice became loud again, addressed to me. "Mom, are you there? So, will you call the bank?" I took a breath. The air was cool and clean. "No, Leo," I said very quietly but distinctly. "What?" "No, you can't or you won't." There was bewilderment in his voice. "Figure it out yourselves," I said, and pressed the end call button. I lowered the phone and looked at the darkening garden for a long time. I was no longer angry. I felt only a cold, righteous calm. They had passed judgment on themselves. They had called things by their proper names. They thought this was my pathetic little rebellion, my show. They couldn't even imagine that this wasn't a show. It was the final curtain, and it was falling for them right now. The days passed, merging into one endless but meaningful labor. I stopped keeping track of what day it was, the 4th or the 5th. What difference did it make here, in this silence, where time was measured not by numbers on a calendar, but by deeds done? A swept floor. A bucket of clean water. The first tentative fire in the stove, from which a forgotten, cozy smell of warmth and smoke drifted through the house. My anger, that cold anger born on the dusty road, had settled. It hadn't disappeared. No, it had just sunk to the bottom of my soul, like a heavy, dense frost becoming my foundation. I no longer thought about them, about Leo and Chloe. I thought about myself. It turned out to be a very unfamiliar and strange occupation. On the second day, I decided to explore the attic. I climbed the rickety ladder, expecting to see only junk and cobwebs. And so it was. But in the farthest corner, under a layer of old sacks, I found a small wooden chest unlocked. I blew the dust off it, which immediately danced in a sunbeam piercing through a hole in the roof, and lifted the heavy lid. Inside, on yellowed chintz, lay neat stacks of letters tied with string, and a thick album in a velvet cover. I brought it down, sat on the porch, and opened it. The faces of long-gone people looked back at me. Serious men in military tunics, women in simple headscarves, round-faced children, weddings, farewells to the army, just photos in a field. A whole life lived in this house looked at me from the faded cards. I didn't know these people, but for some reason I felt a strange kinship with them. They too had lived, worked, loved, raised children on this land. I turned the pages and thought of my own album, which was left back in the city. A thick blue one with our photos with Richard. Our wedding. Leo's birth. His first grade. College. Here we are all together at the sea. Leo still a little boy, building a sandcastle. And here Richard and I, just the two of us in the park a year before he passed. My condo is not just walls and square feet. It's an album just like this, a repository of my life. Every cup, every book on the shelf, every scratch on the parquet floor is a line in my story. And the thought that people alien in spirit were now lording over it stung more sharply than any reproach. I realized I wasn't fighting for property. I was fighting for my past, for the right to my own memory. It was with these thoughts that, as usual towards evening, I climbed my communication hill. I decided to call the lawyer, Evelyn Reed, to see if there was any news. I had no illusions. I understood that such cases are not resolved quickly, but I needed to hear that the process was moving forward. She answered immediately, as if she had been waiting for my call. But her voice was not as cheerful as last time. It was somewhat tense. "Margaret, good evening. I'm glad you called. I was just about to look for you. Is something wrong, Evelyn?" I asked, and my heart, which had been beating calmly and evenly, did a worried flip. "Let's just say there are some complications," she said, choosing her words. "I made the preliminary inquiries as we agreed. Your ownership right to the condo is indisputable. You are the sole owner. It's all clean. Then what's the problem?" I asked impatiently. She paused. Margaret, there is a lien on your property. The word was unfamiliar to me. What does that mean? It means that certain restrictions have been placed on your property. It cannot be sold, gifted, or be part of any other transactions until this lien is removed. What kind of lien? Where did it come from? The cold began to return, but now it was different, anxious, prickly. And then the lawyer said the phrase that split my world into before and after. She said it quietly, almost casually, but for me it sounded like an explosion. Margaret, your condo is collateral for a commercial bank. A loan agreement for a very large sum has been issued against it. I was silent. I couldn't breathe. The air was stuck somewhere in my throat. Collateral. A loan. How? When? It was the only word I could force out. The agreement was signed 8 months ago, Evelyn replied. 8 months. An image instantly flashed in my mind. Last winter. I was seriously ill. Pneumonia. I lay for 2 weeks with a high fever, almost delirious. Leo was at work and Chloe was taking care of me. She was so attentive, bringing me broth, changing compresses, running to the pharmacy, and constantly fussing with some papers. Mom, some documents came from the tax office. You need to sign them before the deadline. Don't get up, I'll bring them to you. Mom, this is just a form for the housing office. Pure formality. Just sign here. I remember her sliding papers in front of me, holding them. I could hardly see what was written. The letters swam before my eyes from weakness and fever. I trusted her. She was my son's wife, my family. I signed without looking, just to get her to leave me alone. Just to fall back into a saving oblivion. Evelyn, my voice trembled, but I pulled myself together. My signature is there. Yes, Margaret, according to the documents, you personally acted as the mortgager. The signature is notarized, but I have already requested copies. There is reason to believe. I didn't need her to finish. I understood everything. This wasn't just document forgery. It was worse. It was a betrayal at the moment of my absolute helplessness. They hadn't just deceived me. They had taken advantage of my illness, my weakness, my trust. They watched me fight for every breath, and at the same time they were coolly sliding a financial noose around my neck. What's the sum? I asked, and my voice now sounded like metal scraping on glass. The lawyer named a figure. It was monstrous, comparable to the value of the condo itself. Money I would never see even if I lived 3 more lifetimes. Something inside me snapped. That thin thread that still connected me to my past faith in people, in family, in my son. It didn't just break. It disintegrated, turned to ash. I suddenly saw everything in its true light. Their plan wasn't just to evict me from the condo. No, it was far more diabolical. They had taken a huge amount of money against my life, my only asset. They had spent it or were going to spend it on their beautiful life, on a new kitchen, on a dress, on whatever. And then, when it came time to pay the bills, they would simply let the bank take the condo. And me. They had evacuated me in advance, hidden me in this wilderness so I wouldn't interfere, wouldn't get underfoot, wouldn't find out anything until it was too late. This dilapidated house wasn't just a gift. It was my tomb. A place where I was supposed to quietly disappear, while they finished devouring the remains of my life. All the bitterness, all the maternal hurt, all the doubts, everything disappeared. It was washed away by a wave of icy righteous fury. This was no longer anger. It was the feeling a person has when they see absolute, unadulterated evil and understand that they must stop it. Not for revenge, but for justice. For the memory of my husband who wanted to protect me. For myself. Evelyn, I said into the phone, and my voice was as hard as steel. I understand. Do whatever is necessary. Get all the documents. Prepare the lawsuits. We will fight. I've already started, Margaret. I'm on your side. I know, I replied and ended the call. I slowly walked down the hill. The sun had already set, but it seemed to me that I could see everything around me with an incredible, inhuman clarity. Every blade of grass, every stone on the path. The world hadn't changed. I had. Before, I just wanted to get my things back. Now I knew I had to go all the way. They had awakened something in me I didn't know I had, and they would regret it very soon. The news of the loan didn't break me. It tempered me, as if I had been plunged into ice water and then thrust into fire, and instead of cracking, I had turned into steel. All these days I thought I was fighting for my past, for memory, for justice. Now I understood that I was fighting for my future, for the right to simply live. The next few days passed in a fog, but it was not a fog of despair, but one of extreme concentration. I stopped noticing the domestic inconveniences. The creaky bed, the cold water, the meager food from old cans of preserves found in the cellar. All of that faded into the background. My body moved on autopilot, performing the necessary work, while my brain worked clearly and smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. I tidied up one room, the one with the stove. I scrubbed it clean. I found an old wooden table in the attic and washed it. It became my headquarters. Every evening I climbed the hill, and now it was not just a communication session, it was a war council. Me and Evelyn. She became my eyes and ears there in the city, in that life that was already dead to me. Margaret, we've filed a fraud complaint with the district attorney's office. She would report in her calm, businesslike voice. I've also sent an official notice to the bank, attaching medical records of your condition during the period the contract was signed. The bank is obligated to start an internal investigation. Good, I would say. What's next? And next, Margaret, we wait. The first shots have been fired. Just go about your business. They will reveal themselves. And I did. I found an old spade in the shed and began to dig a small patch of land in front of the house, clearing it of years of weeds. The work was hard, the earth was compacted, the roots of the weeds ran deep. But with every root I pulled, I felt as if I were freeing not only the land but my own soul. I was uprooting my past, my blind love, my victimhood. It was painful but necessary. And then, on the 5th day after our conversation about the loan, the storm broke. In the evening, as usual, I was talking to Evelyn, but this time her voice sounded different. There was a note of restrained triumph in it. Well, Margaret, she began without preamble, the ice is breaking. This morning, a courier delivered a registered letter with a return receipt to your son and his wife at your address. Pictured it. Morning. They are drinking coffee in my kitchen, discussing what color to order for the cabinet fronts. The doorbell rings. A courier. They sign for it, carelessly opening the thick envelope. What's in the letter? I asked. An official notice from me, as your legal representative. It states your full and sole right to the condo, that any attempts to conduct transactions with it will be stopped in court. And most importantly, it contains a demand to provide an explanation within 24 hours regarding the loan agreement, which we claim was concluded fraudulently. I was silent, listening to her words. But that's not all, she continued. This morning, the bank's security service, having received my documents, reacted harshly. All accounts to which your son had access, including credit cards and joint savings funds, have been frozen pending the outcome of the investigation. Arthur Jennings personally supervised. Frozen. What a precise word. Their world, built on my money, on my betrayed trust, was covered in a crust of ice. Did they try to do anything? I asked, already knowing the answer. Oh yes, the lawyer chuckled. I've already had a call from the bank. First, your son rushed in shouting, demanding, threatening. When they calmly explained that he wouldn't get a penny until the fraud investigation was over, they say he turned pale and left. An hour later, his wife came to the bank and threw a tantrum, demanded to see the manager, screamed about consumer rights, that she would sue the bank. They politely showed her the door. Their world is collapsing, Margaret. Faster than they expected. I sat on top of the hill, the wind whipping my hair. I looked at my abandoned village, at the dark silhouettes of the houses, and I felt no gloating. I felt the disturbed order of things being restored. Justice is not revenge. It's just putting everything back in its place. And then my phone rang again. Leo's number. I dropped the call with Evelyn and answered my son's. Mom, what have you done? It wasn't my Leo's voice. That soft, slightly condescending tone he had used with me for the past few years was gone. This was a shriek, high-pitched, breaking, full of animal terror. I was silent. Are you crazy? We got some papers from a lawyer. The bank blocked all our cards. Everything. We don't even have money for groceries. Are you trying to ruin us? He was choking on his rage and panic. In the background, I could hear Chloe's sobs. Not quiet, bitter weeping, but loud, demonstrative, hysterical wails. Do you understand what you're doing? He screamed. Chloe is unwell. She can't be stressed. And you with your senile dementia have decided to ruin our lives. I haven't done anything, Leo, I answered quietly and calmly. The contrast between his scream and my whisper seemed to stun him. He fell silent. You and your wife did all this. What? What did we do? We gave you a present, bought you a house. And you repaid us like this. You tried to steal my condo, Leo. You took out a loan against it while I was dying from illness. You abandoned me here so I wouldn't find out anything until the bank took my home. That's what you did. A dead silence fell on the other end of the line. As dead as in this village. I could only hear his heavy, ragged breathing. He hadn't expected this. He thought I knew nothing. He thought it was just resentment, just a show. But it turned out to be a verdict. Mom, he finally croaked, and a pathetic, pleading note appeared in his voice. Mommy, it's not like that. It's a mistake, a misunderstanding. We'll explain everything. Just cancel everything, okay? Withdraw all these papers, we'll come and talk. Come, I said. Really? Hope flickered in his voice. You'll cancel everything? No. I said. Come. I'm waiting for you. I ended the call. That's it, now they know. They know this isn't a whim, not resentment, this is war. And they know that I know their darkest secret. Now their panic will turn to desperation, and desperation drives people to the most insane acts. I walked down the hill. The night was dark, but I walked confidently. I knew they would come, and I was ready. They arrived the next day around noon. I heard them long before I saw them. The roar of an engine that furiously and inappropriately tore the silence of this sleepy village, and the screech of brakes right in front of my house. Dust billowed up, covering the wild currant bushes. I didn't move. I sat on the same porch where they had dumped me a few days ago, peeling new potatoes I had found in the overgrown garden with an old knife. A few tiny tubers the size of quail eggs. My lunch. The car doors slammed almost simultaneously. Leo jumped out first. Pale, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing an expensive shirt, but it was wrinkled as if he had slept in it. Behind him, Chloe emerged more slowly. Her face was swollen, her makeup smeared, but she still tried to hold her head high, with that expression of disdainful superiority that had become her second nature. They stopped a few steps from the porch, looking at me. I didn't raise my head, continuing to carefully peel the thin skin from a potato. This simple, monotonous work grounded me, kept my emotions from taking over. I was not a participant in the drama, but a spectator. Mom, Leo began. His voice was hoarse, pleading. He took a step forward, holding out his hands as if he wanted to hug me. I didn't pull away, just kept looking at my hands. Mommy, what is all this? Why are you doing this to us? I placed the peeled potato in a bowl of water and took the next one. I was waiting for you, I replied, not looking at him. This simple phrase seemed to confuse him. He had expected screams, reproaches, tears, anything but this icy, detached calm. We came to talk, he stammered. Mom, this is all some terrible misunderstanding. We're family. Families should help each other, not sue each other. He spoke learned words, correct but empty. There wasn't a drop of sincerity in them, only fear. Fear of losing everything he considered his by right. At this point, Chloe's patience snapped. She stepped forward, pushing Leo aside. Enough of this circus, she hissed, her face contorted with malice. Have you completely lost your mind in your old age? Gone wild in your wilderness? What right did you have to block our accounts? Who gave you that right? She was almost screaming. Her thin, unpleasant voice grated on my ears. Do you even understand what you've done? She continued, pointing a finger with a perfect manicure at me. You're embarrassing us. We had to cancel the kitchen order. Cancel it. People are laughing at us. And me? I'm not supposed to be stressed. The doctor forbade it. I'm carrying a child, your grandchild, and you're driving us into poverty. She threw out her main trump card, the pregnancy. Before, that one word would have made me forget myself and rush to fulfill their every whim. But not now. The ice in my chest didn't even tremble. I slowly raised my eyes to her, just looked, for a long attentive moment without blinking, the way one looks at an unfamiliar, unpleasant object. My gaze made her falter. She stumbled, fell silent, but immediately recovered, and her face flushed again. Leo took over, again trying to play the role of peacemaker. Mom, really? Chloe is right, she can't be nervous. Please, let's solve this amicably. You're offended, we understand, we're sorry we got carried away. Maybe this house isn't the best gift, but we'll fix everything, we'll return everything. Just call your lawyer. Tell him you've changed your mind. Right now. Here, take my phone. He held out his shiny smartphone. As if it were that simple. To call, and all their lies, all their betrayal would disappear. Be erased like writing in the sand. I put down the knife and the last potato in the bowl, wiped my hands on an old apron and slowly stood up. I was on the same level with them. They stood on the ground, I was a step higher on my porch. You want me to cancel everything? I asked quietly. Yes, yes, Mommy. Leo nodded eagerly. Chloe looked at me defiantly, pressing her lips together. So that I can give you my pension again, my condo, my life? Mom, don't exaggerate. Leo winced. The condo is ours jointly, and we would always take care of you. Like you took care of me when I was sick? I asked, and my voice became even quieter. But in the ensuing silence, it sounded deafening. They froze. I shifted my gaze to Chloe. She instinctively took a tiny step back. I remember everything, Chloe dear, I said, for the first time in many years calling her what she liked. I remember you sitting by my bed. I remember your caring hands. And I remember the papers you slipped me. You said they were for the tax office, for the housing authority. Pure formality. Chloe's face turned as white as a sheet. Her haughtiness, her rage, her confidence. It all washed off her like bad makeup in the rain. All that was left was naked, animal fear. Leo looked from me to his wife, understanding nothing. Mom, what are you talking about? I looked at my son again. There was fear in his eyes, but also incomprehension. Maybe he really didn't know all the details. Maybe she had wrapped him around her finger too. Or maybe he just preferred not to know. It didn't matter anymore. He was an accomplice. I'm talking about the loan, Leo, I said, articulating each word. About the large loan you took out from the bank 8 months ago against my condo with my signature, which you obtained when I was unconscious. Did you think I would never find out? Did you think I would die quietly here in this ruin, and the bank would just take my home for your debts? The blow hit its mark. It was evident in the way Leo staggered, as if he had been punched in the gut. He looked at Chloe with horror and a new bitter understanding. She didn't look at him. She looked at the ground, at her expensive shoes, stained with village mud. All their tricks, all their manipulations had crumbled to dust. They stood before me, exposed in their greed and lies. The masks were off. The show was over. So, Leo, I finished in my quiet, even voice, do you still want me to call the lawyer? He couldn't utter a word. He just opened and closed his mouth like a fish thrown on the shore. Chloe pulled her head into her shoulders, transforming from a predator into a hunted animal. The pause was long, heavy. In that pause, the last drop of my motherly love for him died. It died and was buried right there by that rotten porch. Leave, I said. It was not an order, not a request. It was a simple statement of fact. Like it's raining or night has fallen. They silently turned, not looking at each other, like puppets whose strings had been cut, and trudged to their expensive, shiny car, got inside. The engine started, not so furiously now but somehow tiredly. The car slowly, almost uncertainly, turned around and drove away down the dusty road. I was left alone on the porch. Next to me was a bowl of peeled potatoes. My lunch, my new life. And the air around was surprisingly clean. After they left, silence fell. But it was a different silence. Not dead and oppressive like the first day, but calm and full of dignity. I cooked my potatoes on the stove. They seemed to me the most delicious food in the world. I ate slowly, sitting at my wash table, and looked out the window, which I had finally managed to unboard and clean. Outside was my overgrown garden, and in it, among the weeds, I saw a few surviving peony bushes. Their dark red tight buds were about to open. I thought that was it, that they, crushed and exposed, would leave me alone and try to sort out the mess they had made. But I had underestimated them again. I had forgotten that a cornered animal does not seek repentance, seeks a way to bite one last time. About a week passed. During that time I had met my only neighbor. Or rather, he came to me. One morning as I was hauling a bucket of water from the well, I heard a calm, low voice behind me. "Here, neighbor, let me help. That's not a woman's job, turning the windlass." I turned around. Before me stood a tall, lean old man with a gray beard and incredibly clear blue eyes. He easily finished turning the windlass with one hand, picked up the bucket, and set it on the ground. "Samuel Blackwood," he introduced himself, extending a wide, calloused hand. "I live in that house over there, 2 lots down. The last of the Mohicans in this village." "Margaret Vance," I replied, shaking his firm hand. "That's how our acquaintance began." Samuel, or Sam as he asked me to call him, turned out to be a retired fisherman. A man of the old school, taciturn but wise and solid. He didn't ask me how I ended up here. He just saw. He saw the expensive car that brought me and left. He saw how I, alone without help, was trying to settle into an abandoned house. And he understood everything without words. He started to help me. He would bring a few logs of dry firewood, or share some milk from his goat, or just come over in the evening to sit on the porch and talk about the weather, about the fishing prospects. His silent presence was a huge support for me. With him nearby, I didn't feel lonely. I felt safe. And then the final battle began. One morning, as I was watering my future peonies, I heard the roar of cars. Not one but several. A whole cavalcade was approaching my village. 3 cars stopped in front of my house, and people began to get out. I recognized them. My cousin Vera from Portland with her husband. My late husband's nephew Owen with his wife. Some other distant relatives whom I had only seen at funerals and weddings. And leading them, like 2 generals leading their army, were Leo and Chloe. Leo looked even worse than last time, thinner with a twitching eyelid. But Chloe, on the other hand, had transformed. She was in a simple dark dress without makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a modest bun. Universal sorrow was written on her face. She held Leo's arm, supporting him as if he were about to fall. A picture-perfect scene. The unfortunate son and his faithful, suffering wife. They arranged the relatives in a semicircle, as if for a firing squad, and Leo, prompted by Chloe's quiet whisper, began to speak. His voice trembled, but now it was not panic. It was a well-rehearsed grief. "My dears, Aunt Vera, Owen, thank you for coming," he began, surveying everyone with a tragic gaze. "We called you because a tragedy has struck our family. A great tragedy." He paused, letting the words sink in. The relatives looked at me with bewilderment and sympathy. "Our mother, Margaret, she is unwell," Leo said with a catch in his voice. "After her illness, she started having mental problems. She began to forget things, to get confused. She imagined some conspiracies, some loans. She doesn't recognize us. She accuses us of terrible things." I stood with a watering can in my hands and listened to this theater of the absurd. I couldn't believe my ears. They had decided to declare me insane, to take everything, to make their fraud seem like a product of my sick imagination. "We wanted to get her treatment," Chloe chimed in with her sorrowful, angelic voice, wiping a dry eye with the corner of a handkerchief. "We were looking for the best doctors, a clinic, and she ran away, found this abandoned house somewhere, and is hiding here. She refused help, blocked all the accounts so we couldn't pay for treatment. She is a danger to herself." We're afraid she might do something to herself." Aunt Vera, a soft-hearted woman, gasped and pressed her hands to her chest. "Maggie dear, what is this? Let's go home to the city. You need to go to the hospital, get some treatment." They looked at me as if I were a violent lunatic, a mixture of pity, fear, and some disgust. I saw my sentence in their eyes. Leo and Chloe's plan was diabolically simple and effective. Who would believe a lonely old woman living in a ruin against a young, respectable son and his pregnant wife who were so concerned about her? I was silent. What could I say? Any word from me, any protest, they would immediately declare a symptom of my illness. See, aggression, an inadequate reaction. And just when it seemed that all was lost, that I had lost this last, dirtiest battle, I heard the quiet creak of the gate behind me. "May I ask what this gathering is about?" Everyone turned. Sam was standing on the path. He was in his usual work clothes, but he stood straight like a general. The gaze of his clear blue eyes swept over the entire delegation, stopped on Leo and Chloe, and finally on me. "And who might you be?" Chloe asked haughtily, looking him up and down. "Me? I'm the neighbor," he answered calmly. "Samuel Blackwood." "But who are you nice people, coming to a woman's house in a crowd and frightening her?" "We are her relatives," Leo shouted hotly. "And we came to save her. She's not right in the head." Sam slowly walked over and stood beside me. He didn't look at me, but I felt his solid shoulder. "Not right in the head, you say?" He squinted at Leo. "Strange. I've been talking to Margaret for a week now, and I see a completely sane, clear-headed, and very strong woman. A woman whom her own son brought here on her birthday and threw out into this shack like an unnecessary thing. I saw it with my own eyes." The relatives murmured. Aunt Vera looked at Leo with doubt. "And I also see a person," Sam continued, and his voice became firmer, "who, alone without any help, is turning this shack into a livable home. She started the stove, cleaned up, is digging a garden. Is that how crazy people behave? I think that's how people behave when everything has been taken from them. But they couldn't take away the main thing. The will to live." He took a step forward, closer to the delegation. "And you young people." He shifted his gaze to Chloe. "You seem strange to me. You arrive in an expensive car, dressed to the nines, but you say your mother cut off all your accounts. How did you get here then, on your last dime? And you don't look like grief-stricken children. You look more like predators who have come to squeeze the last out of an old woman. Only instead of soldering irons and flat irons, you have tears and false words." The final words he pronounced loudly and distinctly, and they hit their mark. The relatives, who had come with sympathy for Leo, now looked at him and Chloe with suspicion. Their well-thought-out performance was crumbling before their eyes. And Vera came up to me. "Maggie, is it true? He kicked you out." I nodded silently, and that was enough. All their lies burst like a soap bubble. The relatives began to whisper, casting angry, condemning glances at Leo and Chloe. Oh, and a big man walked up to Leo. "What the hell are you doing, you scumbag?" he growled. "Trying to drive your own mother to her grave?" Leo backed away. Chloe grabbed his arm and dragged him towards the car. Their public trial had turned into their public disgrace. They fled under the contemptuous gazes of those they themselves had brought as judges. But as they scrambled into their car, Sam took one more step forward. His voice was no longer loud, but low and carrying. "And one more thing, Sonny," he said, looking directly at Leo. "You might not remember me, but I remember you. My name is Samuel Blackwood. My younger brother was Arthur Blackwood. He owned a small shipping company in the harbor. A company you and your firm drove into bankruptcy 10 years ago with a predatory buyout. You ruined him. He lost everything. He died a year later of a heart attack. I bought this land and waited, not for revenge, for justice. And it seems justice has a funny way of finding you." The silence that followed was absolute. Leo froze with his hand on the car door, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. He remembered. Oh, he remembered. Chloe stared at Sam, then at Leo, a new kind of fear dawning in her eyes. The relatives who had started to disperse stopped and turned back, their faces a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The story had just taken a turn no one expected. "The loan you took out against your mother's home," Sam continued, his voice like the grinding of stones. "It wasn't from a commercial bank, was it? No bank would give that kind of money to a junior executive with a spotty record. You went to private lenders, didn't you? The kind of people who don't send letters when you default. The kind of people my brother got tangled up with because of you." Leo didn't speak. He couldn't. He just stared at Sam, the past rising up to choke him. "I know them," Sam said quietly. "They know me. And they know you owe them a lot of money. Money you no longer have. You didn't just betray your mother, boy. You made a deal with the devil. And now the devil has come to collect." He let the words hang in the air. The relatives began to back away slowly, wanting no part of this new, dangerous reality. Chloe finally found her voice, a thin, terrified squeak, and yanked Leo into the car. They sped away, not in shame this time but in pure terror. The cars of the relatives followed, one by one, leaving a trail of dust and shattered lies. Finally, it was just me and Sam on the road. I turned to him. "Thank you," I whispered, the words inadequate. He just smiled into his gray beard. "Don't thank me, neighbor. Truth has a way of coming out. Sometimes it just needs a little push." I watched the dust from their cars settle on the road, and I knew this was the final end. They hadn't lost in a courtroom or a bank. They had lost here on this land in front of simple people, and in the face of a past they thought they had buried. And that defeat was more terrifying for them than any financial ruin. It was a moral bankruptcy, complete and irrevocable. The dust on the road settled, and with it the dust of my past life. From that day on, I never heard from them again. Evelyn, my faithful lawyer, brought the legal matters to a close. The bank, under pressure from the DA's investigation and the threat of scandal, quickly recognized the loan agreement as fraudulent. All claims against me were dropped. What happened to Leo and Chloe, I didn't inquire. I only knew that they had to face the consequences of their actions, both legal and otherwise, without my help, without my money, and without my forgiveness. Their world, built on lies, had collapsed, burying them under its rubble. And my life was just beginning at 63. The first thing I did, once all the legal formalities were settled, was sell the condo in Boston. Without regret. I went there one last time to collect the most precious things: the photo album, a few books, and my husband's old armchair. Walking through the empty, echoing rooms, I felt no nostalgia. The place had ceased to be my home. It had become just a piece of real estate, cold and foreign. My home was here now, in this quiet, forgotten village. With the money from the sale, along with what was in my secret savings account, I began to build. Not just a house, but a life. I hired a crew from the nearby town. They put on a new roof, installed new windows, and built a proper Russian stove with a sleeping ledge. I worked alongside them, painting, cleaning, feeling the satisfying ache of honest labor in my muscles. The house transformed from a dark, gloomy shack into a cozy, bright cottage. In the spring, I started a garden. Sam helped me clear the old, diseased trees and plot out a vegetable patch. For the first time in my life, I planted my own potatoes, carrots, and onions, tending to each sprout like a small child. And the earth, feeling my care, responded with an incredible bounty. My peonies bloomed in a huge, lush bush, their scent filling the air. Sam and I became true friends. We didn't pry into each other's souls, but we understood everything without words. In the evenings, he would often come over for tea with herbs we had gathered in the woods. We would sit on my new porch, drinking tea from old porcelain cups and watching the sunset in a comfortable silence that was more meaningful than all the conversations I had had in the last 10 years. Sometimes I thought of my son, but it was no longer with pain or resentment. It was with a kind of pity, as for a lost stranger. I had raised him, given him everything I could, but I couldn't instill in him what he didn't have: a conscience. That was not my failure. It was his choice. I let him go, mentally cutting the last thread that still bound me to him. He was no longer my duty, my pain, my responsibility. He was just a man who had once been my son, I am 65 now. I am sitting on my porch. In my hands is a cup of hot tea with mint from my garden. The sun is setting behind the forest, painting the sky in incredible colors. The air smells of cut grass and flowers. In the house, firewood crackles warmly in the stove. A stray kitten I named Vasily is purring on my lap. I look at my hands. They are rough from working in the garden, my nails not as manicured as they used to be. But these are the hands of a living person. A person who is building her own life. Sometimes I think I should be grateful to Leo and Chloe. If not for their cruelty, I would have lived out my days as a shadow in someone else's life. I would never have known what I was capable of. I would never have met Sam, never have seen these peonies bloom, never have tasted the water from my own well. They wanted to bury me, but instead they gave me a real life. I take a sip of tea. It is tart, fragrant, alive. I think about how dignity is not something others give you. It is not their respect, not their recognition. Dignity is what you find inside yourself. What you win back from fear, from resentment, from despair. What you reclaim for yourself when it seems all is lost. And that quiet, hard-won victory is true happiness, and it is true freedom.